Kingdom Come: Deliverance is a game that delivers its players into an unforgiving medieval world steeped in historical realism, where power is dictated by if your blood runs blue or not, where war is a game of politics and survival is not guaranteed. Set in the Kingdom of Bohemia during the early 15th century, we're dropped into the middle of a brutal civil conflict. Emperor Charles IV is dead and his son Wenceslaus sits on the throne, a ruler seen by many as weak and unfit. The people even have a name for him, King Wenceslaus the Idle. His half-brother, Sigismund of Hungary, seizes the opportunity to invade, capturing and locking Wenceslaus up and plunging the land into chaos. Sigismund plans to take the throne by blood. Nobles pick sides, mercenaries roam the countryside, and ordinary people are caught in the storm of war. But it is in this bleak world that we meet Henry. Now, Henry isn't the typical protagonist that we're used to seeing in RPGs. He's not a chosen one, not a legendary warrior, not particularly skilled when we first meet him, and hardly even an underdog. He's just the blacksmith's son, ordinary, untrained, and entirely unprepared for the brutal world around him. He is your everyday common man who grew up in a small village but whose world came crashing down all around him. However, he lived, and through the ashes of his dead family and friends rose Henry, a man possessed by the ghosts of his loved ones, who through the gift of war would become more than he could ever have become without his tragedy. I also can't help but think about if he is on the right or wrong side of history, especially when you look at both sides of the overall conflict throughout the game. From a boy who just wanted to see the world to a man bloodthirsty for revenge, that transformation, that right there is definitely uncommon. And that is precisely what makes him a distinctively psychologically compelling character in gaming. Unlike most RPGs where the player starts off powerful or destined for greatness, Kingdom Come: Deliverance forces you to struggle. It immerses you, from trying to learn how to fight, to how to navigate interactions with people, to how to stop being hungry.
I feel quite hungry!
Henry has no grand prophecy guiding his actions, no divine gift that sets him apart. He is simply a young man thrown into chaos, trying to survive in a world that does not care about him. But what makes Henry interesting isn't just where he starts, it's the process of how he changes. Because what we have here is a character who was born one way but chose to die. I mean, he's not technically dead yet in the game, but he picked a different path than the one that had been laid out for him initially. Yet the harsh reality is that despite his rise, he still has a ceiling preventing him from going higher into nobility. Because Henry is a commoner, and peasants, no matter what, can never pierce the veil that separates them from the upper echelons of society. But his odyssey isn't just about getting stronger or ascension, it's about how trauma, revenge, resilience, and identity shape him as a person. So the questions therein lie. What truly drives Henry? Is it justice? Is it revenge? Is it simply the will to survive? Is it hunger?
I feel quite hungry!
And how do the psychological forces at play both within Henry and in the world around him mold him into the man that he becomes? Today, by request from many of my viewers, we will be psychoanalyzing Henry. And if you enjoy video essays where we look at video game characters through a pair of psychological lenses, stab the like button. If not, help me out by booping the dislike button, and welcome to the psychology of
Henry in Kingdom Come: Deliverance.
Long ago, Henry was living a life of peace and harmony, but everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. The bloody massacre at Skalitz was his defining moment, a brutal, traumatic event that tore his life apart. His parents were viciously slaughtered by the humans, his home reduced to cinders, and he was forced to flee, powerless to stop any of it. But this is where his psychological transformation begins. Because as we look at Henry's experience from beginning to end, we see how he deals with PTSD. Throughout Kingdom Come, both 1 and 2, we see that Henry is experiencing nightmares and flashbacks, all of which are responses to witnessing and experiencing sudden and extreme trauma.
Help us soon. Don't be a coward.
Now, although the game never explicitly states that Henry suffers from PTSD, we the viewers see the blatant side effects of his actions that suggest an internal struggle with his trauma. He is haunted by his past, and his need for revenge isn't just about justice, it's about making sense of what happened. It is staggeringly traumatic to watch your parents stabbed and slashed to death. Henry couldn't do anything except freeze and watch it happen. But the face of Marquard von Aulitz was seared into his mind. However, there is also the matter of survivor's guilt, a condition in which a person who lives through a traumatic event feels guilt for having survived while others did not. You see, Henry fled during the burning of Skalitz while his family and friends perished. This guilt haunts him. It weighs on him, pushing him to take up the sword, and he would then promise to never run away again.
Next time I won't run. I'll never run away again.
But is he doing it for justice? Or is he simply trying to ease the burden of his own survival? Well, from a Freudian perspective, we can see Henry's response as a form of repression. Sigmund Freud argued that traumatic memories are often pushed into the unconscious, but they continue to manifest in behaviors. Henry doesn't spend much time openly grieving. His loss is buried under a singular drive: vengeance. And this focal point is what I want to narrow down on. His mind replaces grief with action because dwelling on what happened is too painful. And I think this is a very common thing that we see in men, and it's something that I do see in myself. Got a problem? Don't think about it. Be busy. Do something. Go pick up something heavy. Bury yourself in work. Distract yourself from having to taste the blood. And this repression, it doesn't ease the trauma. It lingers beneath the surface, shaping every decision that we make. Now, Henry's quest is driven by his inability to let go of the past. He's not just fighting for a future, he's fighting because this is all he has left, the agony of his loss. And when his father's sword, a symbol of his final moments with Dad, falls into the hands of Istvan Toth, Henry decides to go full John Wick to get it back. But is revenge truly the path to healing? Or is he simply running from the pain? So, revenge is actually one of the most primal human emotions deeply ingrained into our psychology. Bear with me. When somebody wrongs us, especially in a profound way, we feel an almost instinctual pull towards balancing the scales. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But what drives some people to go to extreme lengths for revenge, while others choose to simply move on? Burgrave Hashek went full psycho murder mode out of revenge. Olda Semin, a noble aligned with Wenceslaus, wanted to take down von Burgo. Von Burgo was aligned with the Ops, King Sigismund. So he tried to ambush von Burgo alongside some bandits, but in that conflict, many of Hashek's men were killed. So that is why he bursts into Semin and is out for blood, for Olda's blood. And he was more than willing to murder any and everybody at Semin, including Capon and Henry, if they intervened.
Are you hiding him?
What do you mean, Hashek?
Don't play games with me. We know everything. He helped ambush Lord von Burgo's company. Where is he?
Let's talk it over calmly. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding my arse. Just look at him. He knows very well what this is about. Your son helped murder my people, and you expect me to let him go? Hand him over, or this place will be reduced to ashes.
If you had a son, you wouldn't hand him over to the executioner either.
Everyone who's with those bandits is a vile traitor, and everyone helping them as well.
Hashek, don't overdo it. Older deserves a fair trial, not a blood feud on his entire family.
That's true. Maybe they didn't even know about it.
I'm going to burn down this nest of vipers, and if anyone tries to stop me, I'll make no distinction between you and them.
He is an example of a man completely consumed by vengeance, and I can't stop thinking about how this place turned from a wedding celebration to a bloody slaughterhouse. In Henry's case, Revenge is more than just an emotional impulse, it becomes a defining force in his life. His father's sword, a relic of his past, and a symbol of his final moments with his family, stolen by Istvan Toth. That sword represents far more than just a weapon. It's not just an object, it embodies Henry's connection to his father, his old life, and everything that was taken from him. Possibly even a reminder of regret, of how he wishes he had just listened to his dad and just settled for a boring but calm and peaceful life. Not that any of that would have changed whether he wanted it or not, because Skalitz would have still been attacked. It's not just about reclaiming the sword, it's about reclaiming his sense of self. But I think something interesting to think about is if revenge is only ever truly about justice, or is it something darker? Friedrich Nietzsche introduces the concept of ressentiment, a deep-seated form of resentment that fuels revenge. It's the idea that those who have been wronged, especially those in a position of weakness or powerlessness, develop an almost obsessive hatred towards their oppressors. And for Henry, this manifests in his undying pursuit of those who destroyed his home, Sigismund, Istvan Toth, Marquardt von Aulitz. But for Henry, it's not just about fighting Sigismund's forces, he's trying to erase the pain of his powerlessness that he felt at Skalitz, because, again, Henry still believes he could have done something. But here is where revenge gets interesting and becomes sweet. And you may have not known this because revenge can also be tied to the brain's reward system. Neuroscientific studies have shown that the act of revenge activates the same areas of the brain associated with pleasure and satisfaction. The studies show the release of oxytocin, the love hormone that we get from cuddling. This suggests that revenge is a form of catharsis in a way. I love my wife, but maybe we should start thinking about if revenge is in our nature as humans. Because why else would humans have a physiological response to vengeance? Maybe this explains why Batman becomes the Dark Knight. But especially for Henry, at the moment, getting back at the opposition feels good. It provides a sense of closure, or at least the illusion of it. However, over time, that satisfaction fades, often leaving behind emptiness or even deeper wounds. However, there is a contrast between the two types of justice: retributive justice versus restorative justice. Retributive justice is the kind that Henry pursues. It's about punishment. You hurt me, now I'm going to hurt you. It's the belief that justice is only achieved when those responsible suffer in return. But restorative justice is about healing, reconciliation, and moving forward, and Henry never gets the chance to choose the latter. His world is one that only respects force. Revenge may push Henry forward, but it's not going to heal him. It doesn't restore what he lost, instead it consumes, leaving little room for anything else. And as long as vengeance invigorates him, he's locked in a cycle, chasing a satisfaction that will never be enough. There's a reason why Henry keeps screaming, "I'm feeling quite hungry."
I feel quite hungry!
And by the very end, we see Henry talking with his parents about the road that he's walked. But some men break when faced with tragedy. Some get crushed, but some others endure. What is it that makes that difference? What separates those who crumple under pressure from those who punch through the rubble that weighs down on them? Because you gotta remember, Henry is not a warrior by birth. He's not trained for hardship. He's not the strongest, the fastest, or even the most cunning. Yet, he survives and thrives in a world that does everything in its power to kill him. Henry is beaten, tortured, humiliated, starved, and thrown into battles far beyond his skill level, but he keeps going. The question is why? Psychologists call this resilience, the ability to withstand adversity and recover from difficult experiences. It is what allows some individuals to cling to life in situations where others would break. According to Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the father of logotherapy, people can endure the most unimaginable suffering if they find meaning in it. For Henry, that meaning begins as revenge, but over time it does evolve into something greater. Because we can see that he finds purpose in struggle, not just for himself, but for the people he fights alongside, the allies that he makes, and the land he calls home. He evolves from a man seeking vengeance into a man trying to shape his own destiny. But that isn't the only thing supporting Henry's rise in the Kingdom of Bohemia. In psychology, there is a concept called locus of control, introduced by American psychologist Julian Rotter. And there are two types, internal and external. Those with an internal locus of control believe that their fate is in their own hands, that they themselves have the power to grab life by the throat and make whatever they want happen. However, those with an external locus of control believe that life happens to them, that they are powerless against fate, that they have no choice in the matter if life decides to throat them. Henry's resilience is tied to his growing sense of internal control. He refuses to accept that he's just some blacksmith's son tossed around by war. He takes hold of his own narrative. Every skill he learns, every fight he survives, it reinforces his belief. And yet, resilience doesn't mean being unbreakable. What it does mean is adjusting accordingly to the situation and evolving. Adaptation breeds success, which is survival. It's about being proactive and not reactive. But one big problem Henry faces is almost a depressing one. He becomes a hardened warrior, a capable diplomat, and a man with influence. He gains status and respect from nobles, rubs shoulders with and sits at tables with the most powerful men in Bohemia, and he proves himself in battle. Yet despite all this, one thing never changes. Henry is still a commoner. So no matter how skilled he becomes, no matter how many battles he fights in or how much worth he proves, he is never going to be nobility. And I ended the game with about 24,000 groschen on Henry, which is probably something like a little more than $70,000 in today's money. And in a world like medieval Bohemia, being in high society kind of means everything. This is the ceiling that Henry cannot break. Although he has outgrown his origins, he can never truly escape them, which is disheartening because, again, he has seen and tasted the life of the elite class, but he's never going to be one of them. Even Sir Radzig, who is his biological father, explains that he simply couldn't be in his life to be a father for him because Henry is a bastard, and his mom was a commoner, while he himself is a noble. And that is a whole bag of boiled apples that Henry hasn't worked through. However, circumstances permitted Sir Radzig to become a mentor in a way, who did technically help Henry go beyond his original preordained station by taking him into his service. Mentorship plays a crucial role in psychological development, and Henry is surrounded by figures who mold him into something greater. Sir Radzig steps up as a guide of sorts. Hans Capon, though often seen as a reckless noble and at first a pompous prick and rival, provides Henry with perspective on status and privilege, helping him to navigate through that side of society. There's Father Godwin, who offers insight into faith, morality, and the hypocrisy of the world. Zizka, and even his mortal enemies Toth and Owlitz, forge parts of his evolution. But despite all this, Henry's reality remains unchanged. He can rise, but only so far. His growth is not about breaking free from the system because he can't, but about learning to exist with it. And in many ways, that is the most profound aspect of his journey. But Henry has lived long enough to become the villain. His father tried to instill in him the idea that the pen is mightier than the sword, that violence should never be the first response. But you see, Henry would still learn that the sword is oftentimes mightier than the pen. His father warned him not to beat people up over disagreements, to use his brain to innovate.
You might win a fight with violence, but you'll never win an argument. Remember, Henry, if you want to convince someone that they're wrong, try using your mouth and not your fists.
But as Henry ventures deeper into Bohemia's fractured landscape, he learns that justice is often dictated by power, and power rarely plays fair. And Henry is forced to confront moral ambiguity, the realization that righteousness is often determined by perspective. You see, Henry and you, the player, the person listening to this, start to see that both sides of the war think that they are both in the right.
I fought for what I believed in.
You believed you'd restore order by killing people.
What do you believe in? In the king who got us into this?
I only did what I had to do.
By slaughtering innocent people!
And are you sure you didn't kill someone's father or mother?
The nobles he serves aren't always just, the outlaws he hunts aren't always evil, and the war he's caught in isn't as simple as heroes versus villains. Unlike many games that offer clear good and evil choices, the mere realization of morality as a whole doesn't even make itself apparent in this game until way later. Over time, Henry begins to abandon the ideals that his father instilled upon him. He becomes ruthless, more willing to take a life when necessary, and by the end of the game, in a haunting hallucination, he is confronted by his parents.
You trampled everything I taught you underfoot. You've turned into the very thing you wanted to take vengeance against. You're just like Istvan. Farewell.
Instead of the warm, loving embrace of a son seeing his parents again, they look at him with disdain and disappointment, comparing him to a bandit. But morality is fluid, a human construct that can be shaped by time, experience, and necessity. But something that connects both the players and Henry together is also something that I believe turns off a lot of players from even continuing the game. Because KCD is not just a difficult game, it is intentionally frustrating, true to the real-world history. From the moment you step into Henry's shoes, the game makes it clear that you are not special. You will struggle to fight, read, navigate a world that doesn't care about you, and that struggle, psychologically, one of the most immersive aspects of the game. For both Henry and the player, frustration is a teacher. Every defeat is an opportunity to learn. Every failure forces adaptation, and once you get the hang of it, it's extremely rewarding. Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky introduced the idea of the Zone of Proximal Development, or ZPD, which explains how people learn best when faced with challenges that are just beyond their current ability, but still achievable with effort. It plays on the idea that you only improve and get shit done when you are forced to. And this is exactly how Kingdom Come Deliverance is structured. The combat system is unforgiving at first, but as Henry trains, as the player adapts, progress is made. The process of learning is slow, incremental, and rewarding, precisely because of how hard-earned each victory is, just like in real life. You see, failure is a crucial part of Henry's journey. He is knocked down repeatedly, both physically and emotionally, and he must decide whether to push forward or give up. Fall off the horse 7 times, get up 8. The game forces the player into that same headspace. There are no easy shortcuts, no instant gratification. This mirrors real-life psychological resilience. People grow stronger by confronting difficulty, not by avoiding it. Henry's path is not one of effortless success, it is one of repeated failure, endurance, and incremental progress. And in the end, the struggle itself is what defines him. And if you're feeling quite hungry,
I feel quite hungry!
watch this video you see on the screen here.